In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can get an RP British accent. Now, RP stands for Received Pronunciation, and it's basically the standard or neutral accent of the UK. It basically means that the RP British accent doesn't have any regional characteristics or influences, so it's not a northern accent, it's not an Irish, Welsh or Scottish accent. It's very specific in the way the vowels are pronounced, and that's what we'll be talking about in this video, along with many other differences with American English. I would just like to preface this video by saying that in no way is the RP British accent the only accent that you should be learning. A lot of people learning English find it much easier to produce an American accent, as their vowel sounds are a lot easier to produce for non-native speakers. Everyone should be proud of their accent, and anybody who has a northern accent or an American accent, in no way is this video saying that the RP British accent is superior. Everyone should be proud of the accent that they have, and no one should feel ashamed. But if you are here to learn an RP British accent, that's something you're interested in, this video is for you. So let's get started. Okay, so before we talk about particularities of vowel sounds, I thought we would just go through some differences between American and British English. That could be quite interesting for those of you who do have an American accent and are looking to maybe switch to an RP British accent. There are several pronunciation differences between British English and American English. I'm just going to go through a few different words. So things like tomato, we would say in British English, whereas in American English they say tomato. Data versus data in American English. Semi versus semi. Aluminium versus aluminum. And finally, zebra versus zebra. And also the letter Z. In British English we say Z, whereas in American English they call the last letter of the alphabet Z. So that's another key difference as well. So if you're looking to reproduce an RP British accent, you also want to be mindful of the types of words that you're using. And later in this video, we will go through word choice so that you can use words and phrases that are much more authentic to British English rather than American English. And that's going to really help you sound a lot more British. But first, we're going to get into the vowel sounds that are needed to produce an RP British accent. This is probably the key thing that characterizes an RP British accent versus other English accents. Okay, so first up is the schwa sound. Now, this is the shortest sound in the English language, and it's also known as the lazy sound because you're going to pronounce by hardly opening your mouth at all. So it's not but just leaving your lips slightly open. And the schwa sound is actually also one of the most common sounds in an RP British accent. So for example, in words like tiger, weather, we hear this at the end. And this is where a lot of people sound more American because they end up pronouncing the R more at the end, whereas in English it's very much an tiger, weather. So that's something to bear in mind if you want to reproduce the RP British accent. Now, next up is the short O sound. And this is also a sound that many non-native speakers find really difficult to pronounce. And it's pronounced with rounded lips, pronounced O. A lot of people will do an imitation but don't round off the lips enough, so it sounds a bit like O, like an American vowel sound. But in order to get an RP accent, you really want to be rounding the lips, and it's more of an O sound, like in words such as shop or plot. And the key is to keep this O sound really short and distinct and punchy. Shop, plot, got, hot. So you can practice doing that, and that'll help you get a lot closer to an RP British accent as opposed to other English accents. Okay, next we have the long A sound, pronounced R. Now, some people call this the R sound, but it's not really an R sound. It's an A vowel, but in British English we have kind of short and long vowels. So this is a long A vowel sound, R. And it features in words like class, path, grass, bath, for example. And this is very different to a northern accent where they would be more tempted to say path, bath, class, for example. So if you're looking to get an RP British accent, you want to be keeping this long R sound rather than taking it to a short A sound. And you want to keep your mouth sort of half open. It's in the back of the mouth, R. And arguably this is quite a hard sound to produce, but if you do manage to pronounce it well, this is really going to give you a key feature of the RP British accent. The final consonant that distinguishes an RP British accent from other English accents is the rounded O sound. And this is really hard to produce. It's arguably one of the hardest vowel sounds we have in British English that a lot of non-native speakers actually struggle to produce, but with practice you will master it. Now, the O is actually a diphthong sound where your mouth transitions from an open to a closed position in words like hello, go, both, coast, for example. And the key to mastering the O sound is to ensure a gradual and relaxed pronunciation. So you don't want it to be too chopped and short. Equally, you don't want it to be too long. You want it to just be a nice transition from O, as if you're just discovering something. Notice how my mouth is going from open to closed. O. You look kind of crazy, but just practice in front of the mirror if this is a sound that you really struggle with. Maybe you don't have that in your language. So I would just try to practice going O many times, even if you look really, really crazy, until you get that right, because it is a really hard vowel to master. Okay, so we're now going to talk about consonant features of an RP British accent. And we're going to start with enunciating the T's. Now you need to pronounce your T's at the end of words, in the middle of words, and at the beginning of words as well. So all the way through a word, a T must be pronounced. If you start dropping the T, it's going to be sounding a lot more like an American accent, because they pronounce the T as sort of a soft D sound. This is known as like a flap or a tap T. So one of the best examples is the word water. In British English, we say water with the T sound, whereas in American English, they would say something like water, and it's more of a D sound. Other accents around the UK, some people will say water. This is known as a glottal stop, meaning they completely drop the T after the vowel. And you want to avoid that as well, as a key characteristic of the RP British accent is pronouncing T's. So water and little, for example, we need to really hear those T's in order to have an RP British accent. Okay, so now we're going to move on to word choice and how you can sound more authentically British by using words and phrases that are commonly used by British people, as opposed to phrases that would be more commonly used in America. Now, this is not to do with an RP accent necessarily, but it is going to contribute to the authenticity of having an RP British accent if that's something you're looking for. So, for example, in British English, we would say car park, whereas in America, they say parking lot. There are many, many examples. In British English, we would say pavement. In American English, they say sidewalk. And a last example is in British English, we say holiday, whereas in America, they would say vacation. Now, it's important to note, if you want to sound more authentically British, you don't want to be mixing up these words. They're not really interchangeable. Obviously, on a more international level, it's absolutely fine to say vacation, parking lot. We would understand what you mean. But as a British person, we're just not really going to be using those words. So stick to the British equivalent if you can. We also have some British expressions that are not really used in America, so by adopting these you can help sound a lot more authentically British. For example, we say things like popping out to the shops. I'm just popping out to drop off a parcel, whereas in American English they would say something like I'm going to run errands. So that's just a key difference. Running errands is something we would never say in British English, although it is becoming more popular with the rise of social media. Another quintessentially British expression is going food shopping, whereas in America they would say getting groceries. So that's also something to bear in mind. It's food shopping rather than groceries if you want to sound more British. Okay, so we've reached the end of the video. I'm just going to finish with a few practical tips on things that you can go away and work on. I would recommend listening to British media, things like BBC News, because they do have an RP British accent, and you can try and imitate this and mirror this by listening and repeating back. This will also help you improve your intonation as well, because a lot of people have got the right sounds but not necessarily the right intonation. So that's something to really work on. Where we put the stress in words is quite particular in British English, so that would also be something to focus on as well. If this has been a bit overwhelming and you don't know where to start, I would suggest by just focusing on one aspect, whether that is the long R sound, the schwa sound, or the O sound, or the consonants, the T sound, and just be kind to yourself. The British RP accent is actually one of the hardest English accents to reproduce as a non-native speaker. It takes many years to perfect, so don't worry if you don't get it overnight. Just keep practicing, keep listening to people with RP British accents, and keep trying to imitate and have a go, and eventually you'll get there. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments any other videos you would like me to make. Also, let me know how you're getting on with practicing the RP British accent, which parts you find hard, which parts you find easy. I would love to know, and I'll see you in the next video.